So let's start out with the tough question, I think. I think there's something like 22 people now on the Democratic side who said they'd like to run for president. How are you going to stand out from that pack? Because it is a pretty big pack.
Well, I bring unique experience to this opportunity and what I'm offering to serve the American people. I'm running for president to bring the values that are at the heart of every service member, of every soldier, to restore the values of honor and integrity, respect and service back to the presidency, and to put the interests of the American people first and foremost, not the interests of politics or partisanship or self-serving politicians or greedy corporations. Actually put service above self, put the American people first, and as commander-in-chief, end these wasteful regime change wars, this work to end this new Cold War and nuclear arms race, and take the trillions of dollars that we have wasted and that we will continue to waste on these programs and invest it in serving the needs of the American people, things like health care, education, infrastructure, protecting our environment, and so much more. And it's those experiences that I bring of serving as a soldier for over 16 years in the Army National Guard, deploying twice to the Middle East, and serving here in Congress in the House Armed Services and Foreign Affairs Committees for over 6 years. It's these experiences that I bring to this job of the presidency and being the commander-in-chief.
And you are known in part, Congresswoman, for that position on intervention or non-intervention, perhaps I should say. And you have at least one kind of endorsement, ironically, from Ron Paul, who has said Tulsi Gabbard is by far the very, very best. She is very liberal when it comes to economics. We probably wouldn't agree on too much when it comes to economics, but she is good on foreign policy. She does not want these engagements, which is an economic issue. We'd save a lot of money. So Ron Paul certainly is with you and really refraining from intervention. At the same time, that is generally thought to be a foreign affairs issue. And if you look at the American people on all the polls, foreign policy does not rank toward the top. And in fact, I don't remember the last time a president was elected based on foreign policy.
Yeah, well, two things. The most important job that the president has is to serve as commander-in-chief and to keep the American people safe. The qualifications and experience that I bring to that job will best equip me to accomplish that mission. Secondly, as you mentioned, you're right. Too often foreign policy is relegated as just a side issue while there are many different domestic issues that many of the other candidates are bringing to the forefront. But as Ron Paul stated, and as I've stated many, many times, you cannot separate these issues because so long as we continue to spend trillions of our hard-earned taxpayer dollars on waging these wasteful regime change wars that are counter to the interests of the American people, that undermine our national security, and that increase suffering for the people in the countries where we wage these wars, as long as we continue to do that, we will not have the resources we need to invest in rebuilding our crumbling infrastructure, to make sure that we've got quality health care for all, to invest in paying our teachers and making sure that we're providing a quality education and meeting so many of these needs that we, the American people, have right here at home.
Representative, the Democratic Party historically has had a bit of a challenge in being perceived as being soft on communism going all the way back to the Cold War. Right now, how do you stand up, if you think you need to a Vladimir Putin? What is your position about Vladimir Putin, and how do you really deal with him from a position of strength if you said basically, I am not going to use the military?
Well, let me clarify something. First of all, as a soldier, I know how important it is to keep the American people safe, to make sure that we are focused on our national security, making sure the decisions that we make with regards to our military actually fulfill that mission of keeping the American people safe, rather than continuing to dishonor our troops by sending them on these missions, waging regime change wars that make our country less safe and are so costly both for our troops, their families, and the American people. So we've got to make sure that war is only seen as a last resort, and to fulfill that mission of keeping the American people safe, make our foreign policy decisions based on building relationships that serve our interests, that serve the interests of our country, and that are based on cooperation rather than conflict.
out of the corner of our eyes, we're watching the President of the United States, Donald Trump, still speaking in the White House, and he is saying now he thinks that a China trade deal may be possible this week. So, Representative, let me ask you about China, because we've heard the Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, in various venues this week, talk about the challenge to us on foreign policy grounds. How would you address that, the position of China as a growing force in Asia and, for that matter, globally?
Yeah, well, look, I think broadly we can recognize that there are challenges that we need to address with China. We also need to recognize that there are areas of shared interest. Now, North Korea is often in the news these days. This is one area where it is advantageous to both us and the world to be able to work with a country like China that's a close ally of North Korea to achieve that objective of denuclearizing the Korean peninsula. So once again, I think it's dangerous to see how this administration has been very recklessly and dangerously waging a trade and tariff war without any kind of clear strategy, because China is a nuclear power. And oftentimes people here in Washington forget that these economic or trade wars can very easily escalate into a hot war. That puts the American people at risk, and that puts the world at risk. Once again, this is why it's important that we have these relationships that are based on cooperation, not conflict, work out the tough issues that need to be addressed, but also recognize that there are issues of common interest that we've got to be able to pursue.
So, Congressman, you've been talking about some very important issues. Everyone agree with that. At the same time, we hear an awful lot of Washington right now. In fact, we just heard the president address, because of questions from the press, about Bob Mueller's report and about Attorney General Barr testifying and about various investigations going on. Can the Democrats up on Capitol Hill pursue issues of true importance for the nation at the same time they're spending a lot of time and effort on these investigations?
Well, I guess that remains to be seen. I think what's important to recognize, and that I've seen as I've spent the last several months out visiting different communities and hearing from people across the country, they're not asking about the Mueller investigation. They're not asking about what's happening with Attorney General Barr. They're asking, what are you going to do to make it so that my sick child can get the health care that he needs? What are you going to do to make it so that our teachers who are working hard every single day are able to get the pay and the basic tools that they need to give our kids a quality education? What are you going to do to make it so that we are investing in infrastructure so that we have clean water to drink? Every American has clean water to drink and clean air to breathe in this country. People are being poisoned right now, today, in places like Flint, Michigan, in communities in New Hampshire, in communities in Iowa, communities across the country, because of our crumbling infrastructure and contaminated, polluted water. These are the issues that we need to be addressing here in Congress, working together to bring about real results and making those investments in our people and our communities that they so sorely need.